Hello friends, I am Michael Kingswood. I write fiction for fun and profit, and this is Story Time, where I read stories that I have written that you're going to like, so you can go have fun, but also go think about checking out some books, because I've written a bunch. Anyway, this is Tuesday, and on Tuesdays we are sharing chapters from my book Glimmer, which is the first book in my heroic fantasy series, the Glimmer Chronicles, which currently stands at 7 novels. We've come to working on number 8 here as the summer comes to a close. And we're going through the first one in case to show people that it's fun and you're going to like it. We're on chapter 29, I believe, this week. Running there to the end of the book because there's only like 30 or 31 chapters in the book. And we're in the middle of the climactic big battle. So if you haven't listened to the rest of these, you probably want to go back and check out the earlier episodes in this playlist on this channel, or just go buy the book. But that's up to you. Anyway, we're gonna get to it, so sit back, enjoy, and on the flip side, I'll have another little message for you.
Chapter 29. Paying Tribute. Eisenhoff rose to a sitting position. He clutched at his wounded leg with his left hand, but grabbed his sword from the ground with his right. Looking up at Raedric with a cruelly triumphant grin, he said, "You should have taken my offer." Raedric strained against the force holding him fast. They had come so close. He had long since stopped believing in fairness, but all the same, the injustice of losing this way was too much to take. Eisenhoff pushed himself across the ground using his good foot and drew his sword back. "Time to die," he said as he thrust upward with his blade. All at once, the force holding Raedric vanished, and he brought his saber down. The two blades met in the air before his belly, but not before Eisenhoff's sword tip struck home. For a heartbeat, he felt his mail straining, and he knew it was going to fail. Then he twisted his hips and leaned backward. The sword cut a trail upward from his navel to the lower ribs on his left side before the impact of his saber forced it aside. The pain of the wound told him his mail had failed at least partially, but it was not the crushing agony of a death blow, so he counted his blessings. Eisenhoff's eyes went wide with shock at Raedric's sudden movement. He lost his grip on his sword as Raedric's saber struck it, and he collapsed back onto the ground. "How?" he said weakly. Raedric glanced over to the side and saw the mage lying on the ground, blood spurting from a wound in his neck, and Melanie helping Julian to his feet. "You chose your friends poorly," he said. Turning back to Eisenhoff, he moved the edge of his saber to the side of the brigand's neck. "Do it," Eisenhoff said through gritted teeth. He almost did. But looking down at the brigand, helpless on the ground, he recalled the screams of the villagers that day. The day he decided to follow Eisenhoff's earlier lead and desert. A very different reason, but the same path. If he killed Eisenhoff now, while he was helpless, how would he be better than what he had run from? Raedric shook his head and stepped back a pace. "No." Eisenhoff looked at him with unbelieving eyes. He opened his mouth, but Raedric cut him off with a boot to the nose. He fell back onto the ground, knocked senseless. "See you at your trial." With that, Raedric turned away from the defeated brigand and hurried over to Melanie and Julian. Julian was on his feet and standing next to Melanie by the time Raedric got to them, but while she stared at Salam as though stricken, he looked over the battlefield. Several of Eisenhoff's surviving men had already fled, those who were able to ride something quickly outdistancing the others. There were not that many of them, maybe a dozen total. He had to hand it to Raedric. The gambit with the archers worked beautifully. Truth to tell, he was amazed they were still alive, although from the look of things Salam would not be able to claim that for much longer. Raedric nodded to Julian in the same businesslike manner he always affected after a battle, then squeezed Melanie's shoulder briefly before squatting down next to Salam. "Did we?" Salam said weakly. Raedric nodded. "Victory is ours." Salam smiled. His cheeks were very pale, and his breath came in shallow rattles. He reached with a trembling hand for his sword, lying off to the side just out of reach. Raedric stretched out and moved the sword closer, placing the grip into the palm of Salam's hand. The dying man inhaled deeply and pressed the sword hilt to the center of his chest, over his heart. "I have..." A sudden fit of coughing interrupted Salam's speech. "I have no sons," he said finally.
No one to pass it on to.
He inhaled quickly and pressed the sword handle up to Raedric's hands.
Use it with honor.
Raedric's eyes widened, and he shook his head. Pushing the sword back down to Salam, he replied, Salam, I can't take.
Do not dishonor me.
Another fit of coughing racked the stricken swordsman. His strength was fading quickly, but he managed to push the sword back up to Raedric. Julian's friend hesitated, then nodded slowly. His hand closed over Salam's on the hilt of the sword, and for a moment the two men looked at each other in silence. Then Salam smiled again, and he let out a long, rasping breath. His eyes glazed over, and he did not breathe again. Standing next to Julian, Melanie sobbed softly. The funerals took place the next day. By tradition of the Vale, family and close friends of the fallen cleaned the bodies and dressed them in their holiday best. Then, at first light, they carried the bodies down to the docks and laid them in dinghies made for just such an occasion. For the rest of the morning, acquaintances would come by to pay their respects and offer gifts for the fallen to use in the next life. Constable Mallory drew a visit from just about every person in town. Salam, much fewer. Perhaps it was because he was a transplant and liked to keep to himself. Regardless, as Julian stood next to the dinghies all morning and watched the relative paucity of visitors who came for Salam, irritation grew within him, eventually turning to anger. Friendly or not, Salam had given his life for the people of the Vale. He deserved more recognition than this. By the time Melanie limped down to pay her respects, Julian was about ready to hit someone. But, for some reason, seeing her there, even as bruised and battered as she was, made him feel better. She waited in line to offer flowers to Constable Mallory and say a short prayer, but she did not linger. Until she came to Salam's dinghy. Melanie nodded a greeting to Julian and moved quickly to the dinghy. She crouched down next to it and dropped something inside. When she did not rise after a few minutes, Julian became concerned and stepped over next to her. Crouching down as well, he saw that she was weeping. They crouched there in silence for several minutes. Julian, because he did not know what to say and did not want to intrude on her thoughts. Melanie, for her own reasons. It was she who broke the silence.
I only spoke with him once, and I was a condescending ass.
Julian was tempted to inquire how that was different from any other conversation she had, but thought better of it. That would have been perhaps a bit too harsh under the circumstances. Instead, he reached out and gave her shoulder a gentle squeeze. I didn't know him well, but he was a man of honor. Protecting you was his duty, so he did the right thing. She nodded.
I know. That's what makes it so hard.
Julian drew a deep breath. I've been fuming all morning about how many more people have been paying respects to Mallory than him. Why was he so less deserving than Mallory, you know? He deserves just as much a tribute from these people, and they're snubbing him. But now, I think maybe that's okay. The fact that you're alive and able to carry on, well, that's a better tribute than some trinkets thrown into a boat. Melanie nodded slowly, but didn't say anything. She just reached up, laid her hand atop his, and squeezed it gently. At noon, the official funeral procession, consisting of the mayor, Lyttelton's high priest, and the deceased's families, followed by musicians playing a memorial dirge on pipes and harps, walked from the temple down to the docks. The usual funeral ingredients came next: selected stories from the person's life, words of encouragement for the mourning, reminders to hope in the gods and look forward to righteousness's rewards in the next life. Julian listened impassively, paying little heed to those words, meaningless as they were. Melanie and Raedric stood at his side. She wept again. He stood at attention as though he were still in the army, which Julian supposed was appropriate. After all the words had been said, men hoisted sails onto the dinghies, untied the boats from the dock, and pushed them out into the lake. The light breeze filled the dinghy's sails, carrying them further from the shore. When they were about 50 yards out, Hiram and Rolf, carrying bows, limped to the end of the dock along with Gilroy, who carried a lit torch. The bowmen knocked and held their arrow tips into the torch's flame. Tips afire, the men drew back and sighted in carefully. The loosed arrows rose in a graceful arc, then descended, landing squarely in the center of each dinghy. Flammable material had been strategically placed in each, and when the arrow struck, the flames quickly spread until both dinghies were aflame from bow to stern. The crowd gradually filtered away until only the deceased's closest family and friends remained. Julian, Radric, and Melanie remained even after they had departed, only leaving when the last remnants of the dinghies had sunk beneath the water of the lake.
Right, so that's pretty cool. Good battle, good story. Love it. Have a long time. Kingswood, you're doing great. Write more books. Okay, I will. And in fact, that one just got released to the world yesterday, and you can pick it up wherever great books are sold. The best place is my website, my store, because I make the most money that way. But it's also available every place else. If you want to check it out before getting it, go read Chapter 1 over on my Substack. The link is down below in the description. And, have fun with that. So come back on Saturday. We'll do Story Saturday for short stories. And next week, Tuesday, we'll be continuing up with what remains of Glimmer Vale. And I'm going to leave you now with the promo video that I made for that book. Have fun.